He was more interested in building subways and got into a real squabble with the Merchants Association and the city engineers, and really was not interested in spending a nickel. In fact, the city was spending so little money that they weren't even spending money to clean the sewers. There was a little bright light that occurred in 1924. The state again held another committee hearing. There was a report that came out that was now suggesting that New York put aside its differences with New Jersey since they lost their lawsuit, and the Passaic Valley sewer outfall was installed in October of 1924. The states of Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey somehow get together and figure out a way of planning. The legislature also made available 52 acres for an expanded Wars Island treatment plant. So that, beginning to see a little bit of light there. And again, there's still no centralization of command in the city. And one of the things that actually helped was there was a borough president of Queens at the time by the name of Maurice Connolly. And for many years, he was involved in rigging bids. He and a guy that ran a pipe manufacturing company were in cahoots, and all the contracts that were written for Queens went to this one company. And it was years after the fact that when the price of pipes skyrocketed, an investigation was made, and he was found guilty and was sent away for a year. But that kind of got the next mayor, Mayor Jimmy Walker, gave him a way of promoting a city resolution that formed a centralized commission for sanitation and sewage. So as that's happening, what happens is the stock market crashes, and so does dissolved oxygen. This is some of the information from Voters Harbor Survey from one station in the East River, shown, and you probably can't make out the colors, they're top and bottom, but I think you can kind of see what was happening from 1909 when these were taken through 1940s or so. I mean, we saw sort of a crash of dissolved oxygen, and as sewage treatment plants were being built, we're beginning to see this coming back. Now, this is sort of what the Metropolitan Sewerage Commission had recommended, and then took it out of their final report as a proposed level of standard of roughly 3 milligrams per liter, which is also now the New York State standard, and you can see how many docks are below there and how bad the conditions actually were in the harbor. 1930s, a little hope, a little despair. 1931, that Sanitation Commission unveiled a new plan and a financing plan for the first time. Again, remember that the city up at this point was really doing all the financing of the plan. And frankly, people were getting a free ride with having sewage being discharged to the harbor. So it was a very, very hard political sell to get anybody to invest any new money at that level to correct any of the problems within the harbor. The other thing that happened was in 1931, the Tri-State Treaty Commission was put together, which eventually led to the creation of the Interstate Sanitation Commission, which was a huge step forward. They had enforcement powers. They took action against people and moved things ahead. And when they took over, when they really started operating, they found 86% of municipalities not to be in conformance with the standards that were set up in the compact. But still, even the New York Times reported that even with all this going on, the apathy of the average New York citizen toward the problem is amazing. 1935, I just put here, interesting that it was an embarrassment for the city that the Wars Island plant was under construction. They wound up being able to fund about half of it. So Mayor LaGuardia went to President Roosevelt and obtained some money to finish that project. But it was slow. The Depression was helpful in regard to getting Public Works Administration workers building sewers in parts of the city. But 30s and beyond, priorities, it's kind of interesting that up until this point, you didn't really see any priorities placed by the city administration on any particular project. But two things happened. One was there was a threat that New York, that Coney Island could be affected. Robert Moses was making statements about creating swimming pools all over the place because the water was too contaminated. contaminated. And so New York City invested in 1936 money to build a Coney Island treatment plant, and to avoid embarrassment of the World's Fair in 38 and 39, because Flushing, New York, people in Flushing were doing exactly that in the Flushing Bay, and they put some money into 2 treatment plants. So as we move ahead, we get into building treatment plants, having a funding stream, being more reliant on the state and federal governments for treatment. And so I'm out of that, I'm kind of out of that critical period. So in summary, why didn't we see the end of the light at the end of the tunnel sooner? What took us 35 or so years to move ahead? If we look at it from today, you can say that the planning was a success, that the problems of sewage have been mitigated to a large degree. The harbor's in pretty good shape. But if you look at it in time steps, you probably see some real barriers. So the harbor crisis was well defined in 1914, but we had significant delays caused by citizen apathy, no clear link to the harbor environment. People were content with getting a free ride. Political indifference, corruption, cronyism. New York elected officials had other things to worry about. And then the strong will of the politicians combined with the citizen apathy really is just a huge breeding ground for corruption. Lack of funding, you can link that to those two items. And then it finally became clear that the kinds of infrastructure that were needed to build treatment plants were clearly beyond the resources of the city, and they needed to get help from the feds. Lack of effective institutional frameworks within New York City and regionally. We see turf battles really were a problem. Regional centralized control to have consistencies and enforcement and standards clearly needed. And in between, we had 2 world wars, 1 Great Depression. And I just want to make the point, I mean, I'm a scientist, and I haven't really talked very much about science up here, and because it's too long, science and technological uncertainties were never on the critical path. And maybe that's a good thing, because it allows some flexibility in the way things got done. It didn't combat the combined sewer system that we have in place today, which many argue is really problematic, but it's certainly a lot better than it once was. So the goals of the original plan in 1914 certainly have been met. However, they fall somewhat short of today's growing expectations for a clean and vibrant harbor. And I'll leave you with this quote. This is this is a bacteriologist that was brought in by George Soper, and in 1911 he said, "I wish it might be possible to convince people of New York, as I am convinced, that no investment, however great, would be too large to secure the complete and perpetual conservation of these waters for purposes of health, of pleasure, and of agreeable and attractive commerce. Nor is this condition merely an iridescent dream." Iridescent dream. He thought if you spent as much money on the sewer problem as you were doing with the water supply, that you would have had tremendous improvements back in the early part of it. So with that, thank you very much.